we can put that in.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yay! All right. As long as you're comfy.
Yeah.
All right, let's rock and roll. Welcome to the Technically Diverse podcast. I'm your host, Jordan. Joining me, as always, is the Quadcast crew. Co-hosting the pod and our resident adrenaline junkie, Ruby. Behind the scenes and working his magic is Uncle Mike. Just remember, if it ain't Mike, it ain't right. And keeping us in line and doling out the law and order is our producer, Roz, aka Peaches. So I'm so excited. I think we have a really jam-packed podcast today on a really interesting topic. Ruby, you recently went viral, and not in the traditional sense. I know at times with COVID, you don't want to say that someone's gone viral, but you went viral in a different way, and it had to do with a protest. So why don't you tell us why you were at a protest, how you managed to go viral, and give us an idea of like what that was about.
So a weekend or so ago, there was a rally downtown to drive over the Gardner through the DVP and then make our way to Bloor Street in front of the Indian consulate. So the purpose was to put a rally together to support the farmers that are protesting in India right now. And the way I went viral, and so the funny thing is I actually was like, I'm going to take a little detox from social media. So I deleted Instagram and for a little bit, and somebody took a picture of me, like me holding my sign. And the funny thing about that sign is my brother, like all night was like thinking of things to say and write on a poster. And it was actually his poster. And he was driving, so I held the poster. And they took a picture of me and we're at the rally. And after the fact came home, my phone blew up like from my family in India, my cousins here, and some random person in Dubai was like, "Is this you?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" So I'm not even actively on Facebook or anything, but my picture is making the rounds somehow because I held this poster up that specifically said something.
And what did it say?
Hold on, I can't even remember what it said because my brother was my brother's poster. So it said specifically, "Modi, leave the farmers alone like you did your wife." So Modi is the prime minister who put these acts in place that are protests that the farmers are protesting against.
So tell me more about this farmers protest, because I've heard like about it in passing, but like I haven't really been dialed in. And with all the stuff that's been going on, I think maybe it didn't get the highest acclaim it should have in the news cycle. So could you just elaborate on what exactly is the farmers protest?
Yeah, so in September, the government passed 3 acts that were essentially around the farmers' bill. And
the government in India, that is, right?
The government in India. So
Okay.
They passed 3 acts. And what this actually caused is, the farmers felt like this was not going to bode well for them in the long run, a lot of the acts that were passed. Because in India, there's a lot of small farmers, medium farmers, and this would ultimately impact the livelihoods of a lot of the smaller farmers who are, I would say, and I was just, reading some facts that the annual income of some of these farmers is almost like $600-700 a year. And so for them to kind of...
A year,
an annual income.
Oh man.
So just to quickly go over the acts, so there's 3 acts. So one of them is the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce. And what this act stipulates says there's going to be a dealing directly with the corporations and private buyers. And the reason this doesn't bode well with some of the farmers is it eliminates something called MSP, which is the market set pricing, I believe that's what it's called. And it ensures that farmers have a regulated pricing in place so that doesn't impact any fluctuations in surplus. And there's always a way for them to have money and not go into a loss. And the fear is this is going to benefit corporations in the long run and really end the MSP system, the regulation of those pricing, and also eliminate what was a Mandi system. A Mandi system is the market that they go and sell their seeds or crops, whatever they harvest. The second act is called the Farmers Assurance and Farmer Service Act, which is really stipulating the pricing. And what it's doing is pushing the ability for them to negotiate contracts for the bigger corporations. And ultimately what that will do is, as as time prevails, it will give more control to corporations to dictate the pricing. And by also eliminating the MSP, the pricing that's regulated, it really jeopardizes their ability to make that livelihood and be able to come earn a living in the years to come, because corporations can now dictate at the price that these crops can be sold.
Wow, it sounds really complex. I could certainly see how if you were pulling in that yearly income, how much of an impact it could have. And I've been seeing some of the protests on TV, and I've been noticing levels of violence. It seems that this is a really contentious subject, and I think I saw older people the other day, fighting police officers. Like I've quite frankly never really seen like some people that old doing that sort of thing. What's that about?
So the protest was done locally initially in Punjab, Haryana, in the States. And when the local officials weren't really listening to kind of why they were protesting, there was this movement called Delhi Chalo. So it was a movement that said, let's go to Delhi to protest at the capital, to have our kind of voices heard. So these farmers that are protesting are either in their 80s, 70s, it's, grandmothers, grandfathers, because this is generational farming. Like this is, their livelihood. So they've made their way to Delhi on their tractors, on their trolleys, bull carts, their bikes, some people on foot. And they were met with violence before entering the borders of Delhi. So there was police brutality, like they were hosed down with big water hoses, batons, barricades put in place.
That seems a little extreme for like an 80-year-old man or like a 70-year-old grandma. Can you imagine like your grandma being turned on with a baton, like a cop?
Yeah, like one of the most like viral images is of a like literally somebody that looks like my grandfather, kind of avoiding the baton. Like it is.
Oh, like a handsome looking guy then.
No, a baton, like getting hit with a baton. What did you say? Oh, handsome looking.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course, my family, like, right? So it is a place like where, and they've brought 6 months of rations to pretty much say that we're staying here till a decision is made in our favor. And yeah, so they're in it for the long haul.
You know what I see with this is they started those protests locally, but we are now seeing worldwide protests with this. That is actually interesting to me, because how you're telling me, these are little farmers, grandmothers, grandfathers, as you were saying, but now it's worldwide. How did that get, to be like with, I think of, me, obviously, I'm a tech head, and I think of the technology that they had to use in order to get it organized for everybody, right? So, you were talking about some of the little microcosms of cities that they have at some places. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So from the support internationally, I think first it starts from, my parents are immigrant parents. I've come from a lineage of farmers. So just hearing from family back home, first stems that notion of supporting their family back home. Secondly, when we talk about from a technical aspect, like social media has made it really helpful to get that information across, across like a global scale through hashtags.
But before we jump to the technology piece, I just want to understand a little bit more about like the protesting and like what the ultimate goal here is. Is it just to stop the MSP like actually coming in, those bills, or is it to modify them in such a way where, for the farmers, it could be right? Like, is there a compromise trying to be worked out, or is it all or nothing?
So there's actually a meeting going on right now. So they've already had, I think, about 3 meetings to negotiate on the terms of these acts. So the stance is to repeal these acts. There's no amending them. It's to repeal them, and that's what they're fighting for. So talks are going on. They're at the table, going back and forth, but ultimately it's to repeal all the bills. because it really is putting the power in the hands of corporations and the government as opposed to the farmer.
And then just so I understand, like, how did you kind of get involved with this, right? Because there's so many different things going on right now in terms of social justice. Like, how did this come across your purview, and how did you get mixed in?
Because I think it's such a family, like it's, even though I was born in Canada, like my roots are and my heritage is in Punjab. So there's a real, like, I'm going to get emotional about it, but it's the real love for your land and your people that really ties to a lot of the injustices that have happened over the course of the many years, and especially in the Sikh community. So in our community, in the Sikh community, we're, grown up with a lineage of feeling like we're warriors. We're always standing up for what's, any injustice, we stand up for that. So it just felt so compelling to be a part of this. And not only to be a part of this, it also feels like I'm not doing enough. What can I do? Like, this is something in history. Like, what would I tell my children? Like, what did I do? Where did I stand when something so historical was happening? Because you hear of a lot of the stories that, the sacrifices that were made by our gurus, our people. So it really is a sense of calling within myself to be like, what can I do? Because your strings are just, you're connected regardless of distance, right?
Do you still have any family that is like back home protesting, or is it? Wow.
Yeah. So my fiance is in India as well. His family, they're farmers. My parents, my cousins, they're farmers. So Punjab is predominantly, a lot of my family are farmers. So they've actually gone. They're there sending support. And the cool thing about this protest is the communities that they've set up. Like overnight, they've just set up mini cities where, they've set up portable toilets, they've set up showers, they've set up a mall, like a literal mall to provide the daily essentials like soap, because there's so much donation around the world to be able to, because like I said, they're for the long haul. They're not going to move till their demands are heard. So they're going to sit there for 6 months, 9 months, whatever it takes, and literally set up a little mini infrastructure there to support them, from donating blankets, because it's also really cold in Delhi right now. It's raining. So the last 2 days it's been raining. So they've got these makeshift kind of tents set up. So they're still strong and protesting through the elements.
Wow. Yeah. That I could definitely understand how that could hit home, especially if you've got family members in there, and the amount of manpower that would take to set up really illustrates how serious this is. I think that we should really discuss the technology that could even allow something like that to happen. But before we do that, I'm going to take a quick coffee break, and we'll jump right into it. Beautiful. Welcome back. So, Ruby, we left off talking a little bit about the community impact that these protests have had, and the mobilization efforts of the protesters to get ready for the long haul. It looks like this is going to be a really long, drawn out effort, but all for good. So I want to talk some more about these communities, because I find it, really cool how a mall could be set up and all these, resources mobilized. And then at the same time, I'm thinking to myself in the back of my head, I'm like, what type of technological effort had to go behind all that? So I'd love to hear some more about the protesting in the malls.
Yeah, so from a community aspect, so there's specific borders that have been blocked because the blockades are for them not to enter into the capital city. So there's major highways that they're kind of set up at. I think there's a total of 7, but there's 4 major ones that they're at and that I've kind of been following. And at these sites, I would say the numbers, from what I was reading, it's anywhere from 200 to 300,000 people that are at these different borders. So overnight. So imagine, like, you know, showing up into a random street where already there's probably nothing really around. That, you know, if they're coming in with 6 months of rations, like going to the bathroom, having access to, you know, internet, and this is where I would say that from a technical aspect, like, you know, having the connectivity where people have set up solar panels on their trolleys and tractors to kind of create mass charging stations, and then just, and this is what we call langar, is something we call, it's langar is community community service to provide food. So there's langar happening, and there's these machines that are set up that make about, I think, like 2,000 rotis like a minute or something. Like, so there's all these kind of implementations of how to make sure that they're supporting the community from by feeding them, by making sure they have access to information, by ensuring that they have access to safe and clean water, and being able to kind of use facilities to go to the bathroom. So overnight, I wouldn't say overnight, so they've been there since like the end of November, with support from communities within India and outside of India.
I think that really hits on something, because you said
Yeah.
communities outside of India, and Mike kind of touched on this about the social media effort.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of explore that. And, you know, Mike, I'll throw it over to you because, you know, you kind of led that. So by all means, brother.
No, I was just it. You know, I sit back and think about it, and think about all the things that are happening, and how does this all, you know, begin to take play? It starts locally, and then it gets, you know, probably within the country. Then this is getting worldwide. You know, I've got messages on my Twitter feed. I've got messages in WhatsApp about this, right? But it didn't start here, right? And if people are starting this in a little farm area where they are creating a microcosm of a city or a town, right? Providing solar panels, what is it there? You know, can this be done without technology? You know, if think if this was done in say 1945, right? Would a little black man in Mississauga be hearing about this? You know, yeah, but it's you know, that's those are the things I think of, you know, and you know, I know we had spoke about this a little bit before, and we talked about, you know, there's word that, you know, they're trying to block the wireless access that they have there, right?
That's just nuts, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
like when you have to go to that level, that's kind of crazy.
It is nuts. It's nuts, and you know, I was looking that up because it's illegal, right? Even with my background that I had, you know, doing a lot of wireless work for companies, I looked at some of the implications of this on their federal level here and over there in other countries, and to, you know, jam wireless signal. And what we mean by jamming wireless signal is making it so that it doesn't work, right? Either for Wi-Fi or for cellular coverage, right? These people right now seems like they are going to be using a lot of cellular coverage if it's available there to provide that connectivity from the people on the front lines to people worldwide, so that they know what's going on. As I said,
I think it's important too that we call out, you know, there's been some speculation of whether or not jammers have been implemented.
yes,
You know, just from our own research and digging, it seems like that might be the case, but you know, just for our listeners, it's sheerly speculation at this point. And I just feel that we should call that out.
yeah. It is something that should be looked at. I'm trying to find information, more information on it. Obviously, it's not something that's going to be written about. You know, kind of have to have a person on the floor there really to be able to talk about that for sure.
And I think that's where a lot of the information, like when you go back to social media, so a lot of what's happening on the ground is shared via social media. So, you know, when we talk about mainstream media, there's still a lot of, I feel just from reading and, you know, comparing to some of the social media feed, there's misinformation. So you have to really do your own digging and kind of, you know, take it for what it's showing you, and kind of have your own critical thinking. And with regards to the jammers, you know, like me, even like I base it on the information I get from family or people that are there. But then when you start reading about it, it's like, well, that's not case, that's false news. So it really is hard to kind of determine the truth. And ultimately, that's what you're trying to get to, is the truth of these protests and where you want to stand for fighting for people.
I think that's so hard to with today's climate of the social media, right? We're constantly trying. We have the ability to aggregate things that are happening, like news, and it can reach us from India to in a small town, all the way here to North America, to Mike's point, to a guy in Mississauga. But then we've also got to deal with the challenges of sifting through what's actual news and what's misinformation. I think that it's certainly challenging, and it's funny to think of how that contrasts to where we were years ago, where maybe somebody would have written a newspaper article, and whoever that writer was in their interpretation, that's what everybody would have taken as word, right? Just because it was in a particular publication in their local area.
So the cool thing that's actually happened as a result of all this misinformation is the farmers themselves at the protest site have started their own publication. It's called the Trolley Times. So they're actually with the artists, with the people there, real-time information. That's what they're distributing now. Their own newspaper, which is really cool. And also what's cool and interesting about that is a lot of the farmers have been labeled as uneducated and dumb, that they just don't know what they're doing. They're just farmers. A farmer, there's different levels of hierarchy education. You can't just label a particular segment of society that works in that industry as dumb. And just seeing things like this, the trolley times come out of this, seeing a lot of the support from the artist community, seeing a lot of just the movement itself. Like, it's smart. Like, they're really going on, we're going to keep this a peaceful protest, and they're not allowing other politicians to come in and speak on their behalf. They're really controlling this from their point of view, and they don't want any kind of infiltration from political speakers, because oftentimes what politicians do is come and speak their part and rally people, but they're like,
and it gets polarizing.
So they're like,
what is Khalsa Aid? Like, I've heard that phrase and term, and I don't think that I'm familiar with that. I'm definitely not familiar. I don't have to think about it. I'm not.
So Khalsa Aid is actually a charity, like let me get my thoughts together. It's a humanitarian relief effort organization that, whether it be what's happening in the Middle East, whether something's happening in the south of India, whether there's, whether it's why can't I get my words together? Whether hold on, give me a second. It's like they're always there to provide relief from giving food, giving rations, giving essentials to people that are in need. So Khalsa Aid, what they're actually doing is on site is they're actually the ones that are kind of implementing the mall that they've set in place. They're making sure that there's bedding, they're making sure there's food distribution. So they're providing essential service.
And they're backing the farmers essentially, because I'm like, when you first said they were setting up malls, I'm like, how do you get all that infrastructure and stuff? But they're kind of like a partner.
And I think when I say mall, I don't think we want to think about it as like a full-on mall. Like,
so it's not Vaughan Mills that they set up.
No. It's not like Vaughan Mills Square ones. It's like essentially like
a market of some kind, like
a little, like a tent that has shelving with soap, shampoo, like your daily essentials.
Oh, I just saw something here. As you were talking, you talked about Trolley Times. I went online and I looked for the Trolley Times.
Yeah.
Found it. I found something that Bloomberg actually has talked about the Trolley Times, and it's talking about it's the fastest growing newspaper. It also has some pictures of the markets that they've had set up with people getting water and whatever they need, and obviously has people reading the Trolley Times while they're there. But it has a lot of information on it, so you just have to do a search on Trolley Times, and it's like the second and third one there that's in the search list that you'd be able to see and get more some stuff that we're talking.
I just did the same thing. I just looked it up.
Yeah, it's pretty good and it's pretty interesting. I'm seeing this come to life.
Yeah,
And then
it really begs the question of like, where have we really seen something like this before? Like what happens when, these sorts of legislatures in this sort of legislation goes into effect. And I think that we'll explore that, but we'll do that after a break because I really need to refill my coffee cup again. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll be back in a couple minutes.
Okay, and we're back.
Wow, my coffee cup is full. Forgive my slurp there. My brother would be really upset. He's one of these guys that does not like slurping. So, Boaz, I apologize. So moving back into things, I want to talk about, how we can, the effects of this at a worldwide level, because I've heard rumblings about other farmers' protests in other areas, and I think that this is really a developing topic, and I don't think that these protests are kind of anything that are going to be going away anytime soon. Especially as agriculture itself, I think is taking a turning point with the introduction of like digital technologies that kind of aid, and the AI that aids in farming. So I think that more and more as corporations look to implement technologies and change contracts around, we're going to see this. So, Ruby, can you tell us about Mexico? Because I heard there's a farmers' protest going on there, and you're a resident expert now, so.
no, so I think I was just curious as to, well, where else in the world are farmers being impacted, right? And by no means am I an expert. It's just out of curiosity, seeing, well, what else is happening in other parts of the world. So just like I think based around NAFTA, and like in July, there was some kind of legislation passed in Mexico that they were protesting against. And again, like I don't have the complete details, but it was just curious to know, like, hey, like there's stuff happening there as well. And it was in a very similar fashion where they're, blocking major highways and kind of to get noticed, to be like, hey, these rallies are being put in place to be like, we're standing up against for farmers' rights. And I think they were advocating for the usage of water between the U.S. and Mexico, and there's a lot of drought that's happening in Mexico. But again, like I think if any one of us does a little bit of a quick search, kind of can read up like more thoroughly. But it's just interesting to me that a lot of what this is, I feel like, is the people against corporations, the people against governments, and who's suffering are the smaller farmers, because in a lot of these countries, a livelihood is like they can't just go become a doctor somewhere and or go work. Like this is their livelihood.
This is it. Yeah.
Like this is generational. This is what they've grown into. This is what they've known. And it's not like they have like billions of acres of land. Like some of them are working off like 1 or 2 acres of land, and that's it. So it's just an interesting thing to kind of read up on. And I think like even other parts, in some countries in Africa. And I think you're going to talk about that.
Oh yeah, I've heard, because we've definitely heard about this in the Ivory Coast, and Roz was chatting about this the other day too, because I believe it has to do with chocolate, and I think I recall a documentary from a couple years ago. But Roz, I'll let you chime in on more on it.
Yeah, I first heard about I guess the injustice and the ill treatment of farmers in Ivory Coast and Ghana on, I think it was the Rotten A Rotten series on Netflix. And it really was just explaining the fact that corporations are exploiting farmers and not paying them a livable wage for the cocoa that they produce. Ghana and the Ivory Coast produce something like 60% of the world's cocoa, but they make something like 4% of the total money within that $1 billion industry.
That's crazy.
And so it is. And so like people are struggling there. It's absolutely ridiculous. If chocolate is so well used and so common, then they should be living a good life. And the reason for that is actually the opposite of what's happening in India, where all of the cocoa is sold in like one central location or a couple central locations. but it's priced so poorly that, and there are so many steps to get it to where it has to be sold, that the people that are actually producing it are not making any money. And because of the fact that they're not making much money, they end up doing more things, like using land that isn't technically theirs. They're also trying to increase profits by having their entire family join them in farming, and that's how you get child labor and issues with that. And so now what the Ghanaian government is trying to do is actually allow the farmers to start selling to companies like that are actually manufacturing chocolate directly. And so they're doing the opposite of what they're doing in India. And for them, it would be much better. So we'll see how that goes.
And you hit something there when you said generational again. And Ruby, you said that, right? This is a family thing. It's generational. This is the livelihood. And I think that we're privileged to live in a great country where if something were to go wrong in our careers, we would have the opportunity to retrain and go into another field. But I think that it can get lost that, we don't certainly face these issues here. And Mike, you pointed out that there was a protest similar to this happening in BC. So actually, what was that all about?
In BC is the Indian farmers, right? So what I was looking up, I'm very intrigued about all this now, is they organized a convoy on New Year's Day, right? And this was in solidarity to what's happening in their country. Right. So this is a big thing. It's been organized all over the world. And I heard that they said that this is the biggest protest in the world. I don't think they were joking.
Yeah, because in India itself, 250 million people are protesting. And that is, not only the farmer unions, but the transport unions, where they're actually going to do a convoy similar to what's happening in BC, where trucks are going to do a similar protest, because it is like, when you look at the unions and look at, what they stand for, it's for the people and to make sure that they're able to have their livelihood. So there's a lot of support worldwide. And when you talk about BC convoys, in Toronto, the same thing. There's rallies that's happening in Brampton, downtown Toronto, California, in London, England, Australia, New Zealand, because there's so much connection, like there's so much disbursement of our people from that land, that we have so many connections back home. And it's just overall, when you're looking at, like, just to talk on Rosalind's point, it's similar and not similar, I would say, in India, because there's a lot of farm debt. Like, a lot of these farmers also have debt, and because of this debt, they don't have the means to kind of continue farming. So there's a lot of suicide rate. Like, I think I was reading a stat, there's 10 suicides a day in the farming community, because they're not able to pay off debt, and there are a lot of loans against their land to make ends meet. So
Ruby, I want to ask straight up, because I want to know how I can get involved and how I could support this movement if I want to get it, because I'm not that creative with signs. I don't think I'm going to go viral like you, and my hair certainly isn't as nice. So I think that I want to understand a little bit more how we can support and how I can get involved.
I think with any movement, anytime you want to support a movement, education, you got to educate yourself, but also being mindful of the misinformation that's out there, right? And I think, educate yourself. There's a lot of information online that you can kind of determine for yourself what's right, what's not, trying to determine what's fact. And then secondly, there's a lot of organizations that are on the ground supporting, like Khalsa Aid for one. It kind of was saying like how they're there kind of facilitating and supporting the people at the protest site through making sure that they're warm, making sure that their medicines are there, making sure all that stuff from an organizational perspective, so donating through that means. And I think the other thing is, like, you got to be also careful with, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but when you go to Change.org and you sign petitions, The donate, and this is what I've learned through me trying to donate and support the cause, is when you donate on change.org, you're actually donating to the, I guess, the website or the people that run change.org. A lot of that money doesn't actually go to the cause of it. So you got to be careful with who you're supporting.
I feel like with any charity, that's always the case. I hate hearing that. Like,
Yeah.
I always feel like there's some intermediary sometimes trying to like not take advantage, but like when I donate, I want to know that the funds I'm giving are going directly to the cause without any sort of middle person. So thanks for calling that out.
And I think like I might be a little bit biased for Khalsa Aid, but through their social media, and I think that's the other thing, like the information is there. Like you can see in real time the investments that they're putting in place, the infrastructure they're putting in place with the donations that are going to them. There are many other organizations, but for me, I feel like Khalsa Aid has proven time and time again through, you know, other relief efforts that they've been a part of in the past, and not only in India.
So, you know what? I think that it would be really pertinent for us to kind of cover off, you know, at a whole, whether or not you feel like this sort of protesting is effective, you know, especially when the police and the government get involved. So, you know, I'd love to open it up. And I know we have a roundtable style podcast anyway, but what are your guys' thoughts on that? And I guess we'll start with Uncle Mike.
You know, this is something that I actually wouldn't have seen or thought of, but you know, Ruby brought it to my attention, and you know, once something is brought to your attention, then you start seeing it more and more. I don't even watch the news. I try not to watch the news because it's always all sad, right? Yeah. But you know, I've been getting this in my social media, and you know, just you know, doing the research for this show. I've been seeing a lot of things, just like what was happening not yesterday or on New Year's Day with the process in BC. It is good to get involved, and you know, using Khalsa Aid is probably your best bet. Like as Ruby said, you know, obviously do we have any information for that we can?
Well, we definitely have some information, and I'll be sure to link it at the end. There'll be a link to some of the charities that you can support, as well as the picture of Ruby, because it's definitely something you want to save. It's quite memorable, and there's a good reason why it went viral. Roz, like, how do you feel? How's this resonating with you?
So for me, I always hate the fact that farmers sometimes are treated, like Ruby said before, as like uneducated people, lower class, not cared for as they should or respected as they should be. Like agriculture is the backbone of many economies, if not like all of them. Without food and natural resources, like no country is going to get anywhere. And so I think that it's really important that we are listening to what their needs are, that we are trying to support them in any way possible. And I'm happy that Ruby brought this topic up for us, because I wouldn't have known about any of it otherwise.
And Ruby, I'll echo that. Thank you very much for you know, bringing this up. And you know, and to Mike's point too, I don't think I would have really noticed, but when one of my friends goes to a protest, like I don't have a lot of activist friends, so when somebody tells me they took the time out to attend a protest, I'm like, that is probably super serious. Let me find out more about what's going on and actually look at it. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being really open about your culture and just kind of sharing and educating us on that. You know, I didn't know about that warrior mentality. I think that's absolutely awesome. That it really, it's nice. It gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling, as strange as that might sound, but it's nice to hear about other cultures. And, you know, I just thank you for opening up like that.
Yeah, for me, I think I might get a little bit emotional, because it's just, you know, like if you ate today, you thank a farmer, like, and just like when I think about my lineage, like thinking about how privileged I am to be here. And when I think about the grandmothers, the grandfathers that are in the cold right now in the rain protesting for their rights. I can go to the grocery store, I can go to work and do whatever, but they're literally there. They've kind of uphauled their day-to-day to go to protest for their rights and for their future. They know that their time has come. They know that, you know, they're protesting not for themselves, they're protesting for their generations to come. They're protesting for their children, for their rights to have that livelihood. Yes, you know, corporations do bring in that ability to make technical advances, but at the end of the day, there's 59% of the 1.2 billion people of India are farmers. And when you look at that and the overall GDP, I think back in the 70s, or I don't know when, was 50% of their GDP in farming for India. Now it's down to, I think, 15%. So just by those stats, you can see how many people rely on their livelihood to be in farming. And if you're just going to uproot that for the benefit of corporations to make more money, you know, in this particular situation, we're looking at the Ambanis and the Adanis, who are billionaires. I think ranked number 19 at the beginning of COVID, and now they're number 4. So you really look at who's really making profit and who's going to make profit down the road. So I don't know, for me, it's really raw. And I just think about the teachings like in our faith. And I just feel like if now is not the calling, then when? And to talk about your point of like, you know, how do you get involved, or how do you bring awareness? It's through conversation, through communication, and you tell your neighbor, you tell your friend, and not everybody's going to stand up for it, but I think awareness is important, because out of the 5 people you tell, maybe 1 will make a difference. And if that's all you can do, like, you can't really do much other than stand up and speak, I think.
Well, you know what? On that end, no, there's nothing that we can use to absolutely follow that up. So I think that we should close on that for today. You know, this has been certainly insightful. And again, Ruby, I want to thank you for opening up and taking the time to educate us all. You know, I feel like this is a really good beginning for all of us here, and you know, this is exactly what, you know, this podcast is about. So thanks again. And on a more casual note, how did you not understand the phrase getting up on the wrong side of bed? Like, I find it astounding that you did not know what that
I feel
was.
like this is false information. So what I heard you say was, it didn't matter what side of the bed I got up from. So I immediately thought about, oh, because you're married, how do you interchange your side of the bed? That's what I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about the saying.
Oh yeah, it's a preface. I should have prefaced that. I said earlier this morning when we were having our pre-show meeting that you know, it doesn't matter what side of the bed I wake up on. You know, as soon as I get together with the Quadcast crew, I start to feel really good, and you know, everything changes. And Ruby was completely confused about the side of the bed. Yeah, she just did not understand. He's like, left side, right side, I don't get it.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about like the logistical aspect of it. I was like, wow, you have like the luxury of like deciding. I'm like, I'm like predetermined, like I'm the right side.
You're the right side? I think I'm the right side too. Mike, what side are you on? Oh wait, Mike doesn't sleep, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
He doesn't sleep.
But Mike, everybody is an android. Like, he doesn't really sleep so much as he powers down for 5 minutes and comes out of a recuperative state.
I like that one. Actually, I do.
Roz, do you have a side?
100%. I'm always. We live in different places sometimes, so I'm always closest to the door. That's usually what.
You know what?
So you're gonna run out.
Okay.
There's a
You know what? I feel like that's true for me too, because for some reason, like when like if there's other rooms at like hotels, like it's always on the side closest to the door. It's weird. But it throws me off.
Yeah, initially I did used to do that, and then my husband said, if someone breaks in, he needs to have enough time to defend me, and so I should wake up quickly and start screaming, and then he would be ready on the next side to handle it for us.
You know what? That makes a lot of sense.
That
I sleep on the side that's not closest to the door. And yeah, I feel like if something happened, my wife would wake up first and then I would be able to spring out of action and then attack while there's a kerfuffle. I think, yeah.
Exactly. We have never lived in a house that has been broken in.
Right, but you
Or
want to be careful.
anyone that has broken in the
dog.
house, but we're safe.
You had a conversation about this though.
Oh, 100%.
See,
'Cause
like
I want
I've done it
Go
without
ahead.
conversation. I've just instinctively done that.
It just came to you
Oh my
naturally, I
gosh,
guess.
Well, you know what, fam? It was an absolute pleasure getting together the pod. Our listeners, you can find us on social media. Don't be scared. On Twitter, we're at Technically D. Come on, get your minds out of the gutter. You know. On Instagram, we are at Technically Diverse. And we will post pictures of Ruby and have the links to the different ways that you can donate to get involved. So again, thank you so much, and stay happy and prosper.
Time as